Welcome to episode 19 of the SNARLcast about indie wargames and their design, coming to you from Snarling Badger Studios. I'm Adam, and I'm here with Vince. How you doing, Vince?
I'm great. You might say I am fully activated. No, I'm wonderful today. I am very excited about our conversation today about sort of activation systems, things like that. This is something that I have a deep and abiding interest in. So today is going to be a lot of fun.
I think that our games are, for the most part, sort of known for the activation systems. I mean, they're known for other things as well, I hope. But I think that people, I know I've had conversations with folks about the activation systems, and I've been told that they've been enjoyable and things like that. So, yeah, we figured it would be a good thing to talk about. And we've also got some updates on what's going on next for Chrome Rangers, which is the game that's going to be in the next issue. I almost said episode, but I didn't. Next issue of Snarl.
I did the same thing recently. I said episode, and I'm like, I don't know why. You just want to say episode, right?
I've also said issue of the podcast, which is also wrong. So it's maybe it's because we're switching back and forth between different mediums or something. But you and I talked a little bit before the recording, and editing is nearing completion.
That's right. So as we sit here recording this it will be complete by the time the listeners are listening to this. So
exactly.
Yes, we're basically on the precipice of completion of that. I know we've got a lot of awesome art rolling in. Basically, we're right on schedule. And normally I would talk a lot more, give you a little more teasers about Chrome Rangers and what people can expect in our upcoming one-on-one mech fighting game coming out as part of Snarl 2025, the annual zine. But in fact, it's going to get folded into the conversation today, because when we talk about activation systems, I actually want to talk about Chrome Rangers activation system in there, because it is very different. So it's unique. We will roll that into it. So stay tuned. More spoilers ahead.
Indeed. Yeah. Did you get a chance to paint or play anything recently?
I most certainly did. So I have been head down, white knuckles on the paint desk, just gripping on, because I have been painting my Hellsmiths of Hashut, the little Chaos Dwarf guys. Thank you very much. I love these new little Chaos Dwarves. I've never liked dwarves. Up until this point, I painted like 4 dwarves in my entire life. Okay.
That's weird. Yeah, because you've painted a lot of things.
I have thousands, quite literally thousands, multiple thousands of miniatures, right? And I have never, of all that, maybe 4 dwarves. And one of those is like a bust. One of those is for a friend. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You're not necessarily a dwarf enjoyer.
Correct.
Yeah.
But then these little guys came around, and I loved them. I can't explain it. I just think they look so cool. And so I've been painting my way through them. I got like 3 units done so far.
Nice.
So pretty happy with that. And I also got a game in with them this last weekend. My first game playing them, and it was a lot of fun.
Do you have a goal as far as like a timeline in the situation? Are you trying to hit like a specific tournament that you want to get it done by, or something like that?
Not really, no. I have my Skaven, and they're really my tournament army right now, because I just kind of finished them recently, or finished them enough to a point. I'll still paint some more Skaven over time. But I have more than 2,000 points of Skaven now, or whatever, So how you want to think about that. And so that freed me up to do this. So I'd kind of like to be done with it by the end of the year, probably. It's a pretty reasonable project timeline. There's other display pieces and things like that I want to do in there. I need to get my Trench Crusade Force painted, so I want to put them into a video. So there's like a lot of other little things. I'm not only going to work on them as it comes down to it. So
right. I should think about maybe bringing my Trench Crusade models to VinceyCon, perhaps, if I can figure out how to traverse with them properly.
Yeah, you should 100%.
Yeah.
I'll get mine actually I'll get them out and get them actually ready to go. Even though I won't be painted, but I'll get my people out. Yeah.
Well, We'll have to talk to Sam too and see if he can bring his as well. Let's see. Have I done anything?
Yes,
Well,
right back at you.
yeah, I've been painting space lizards or splizzards on Twitch, and that's been fun. They're purple and gold. I'm nearly finished with. There are three of these big chunky guys with rocket launchers on their shoulders. They're like big gators, and I've been painting those guys, and I've got three of them. There's just three of them in the army, and they're nearly done. So yeah, I've got to get them finished up and then move on to the next unit. I'm looking forward to getting that second army in that situation. Well, technically third army, second army that I've painted, third army in that I built an army for Grimdark Future using
Sure.
models I already had from the Imperial Guard, so that was easy. But that this will be army number 3 technically, and
How's it feel to be an army painter now?
it's weird. I mean, they're small armies because they're 1,000 points.
Okay.
Like honestly, like the Robot Legion army is 40 models, and
That's absolutely an army.
I watched a video.
My Skaven army is less than 40 models.
Well, that's crazy. I watched a video a couple days ago from $1 Billion Clown Farm, Tyler, and he went to the Las Vegas Open and he went to the used models area, bought an army, painted it in the hotel room overnight, and then used that army in the championship. And
incredible.
Yeah. And but my point is that I think he had 80 berserkers. So, already like just the line troops in his army are twice as big as my entire army of Robot Legions. So it's a smaller model account, and I get it. But and then in the lizards, I think are 37 models. So they're smaller armies, and I'm okay with it. But it is interesting. But I don't know. I have another plan for another army basically as soon as I get done with the lizards, or maybe even soon. No, I'll probably do them after the lizards. I was thinking about doing them in tandem, like offline, but I don't know. I'll probably do them on actually on Twitch and stuff like that. We'll see how that goes. But that army's basically built, so that's also a benefit, or I don't have to build the stupid things. I'm really tired of building, specifically GW models. But
I understand. Yeah. I will say the like Hellsmiths, absolute pleasure to build.
Oh,
they were so easy. Nice. They're honestly more like old figs. Like they had like set legs and like even their sort of torsos and legs were all one or two pieces that you just kind of put together because they have like long skirts on. So it's just like torso and legs snap together. And then they have just like interchangeable arms and interchangeable heads.
Yeah, that is nice. Yeah, I would like to see them do more of that, frankly. But yeah, and then I haven't unfortunately had a chance to play anything, but I am looking forward to. We're going to do some probably playing at VinciCon. And
I believe we just scheduled a game of Trench Crusade, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, there's that too, but we were also talking about working on some other play testing stuff as well. For
there may be a little play testing of our next main game. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Spring 26 game. So yeah, cool. Am I trying to think? Anything else? Not really. Nothing else. Hobby or playing. I've been busy with a lot of other things, but yeah. So, activation systems for your indie games, or I mean, really for any game. But if we're talking about it here, it's predominantly for indie games. Can I just start,
please,
by asking you a question?
I'm ready.
Do you think that Warhammer 40K will ever move away from its current activation system, which is roll off to see who goes first, and then you go, I go?
Ever's a long time.
I mean, good point. Like, I'm talking about, let's say, the next 20 years, as opposed to, say, like geologic time.
50-50.
Yeah, it's just, they're so stuck on it. And I feel, I mean, and you would know this better than I, but aren't there still people complaining about the activation system in Age of Sigmar? It's been 10 years.
Oh, sure. Yeah, 100%.
There are still people that are like, yeah, but what if you roll and then you get to go twice in a row? And I'm like, that's the point. Like, that is literally
the point, in fact, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just do want to shout out here Sam Pearson, who I hope we can get on this podcast at some point in the future.
Mm.
So Sam Pearson was a former designer for Games Workshop. He left. He designed like Warcry and Spearhead and other things.
Mm-hmm. I watched his Warcry video
There you go.
recently, sometime over this weekend, and he mentioned me because he's like, and Uncle Adam likes Warcry, and I'm like, well, it's true, it's true.
He's got your number. Good.
Yeah.
Sam, what's up, buddy? Put an email on your YouTube page. I'm saying this everywhere. I'm trying to contact you. What does it take? Smoke signals? I think he's in like Korea or something. I don't know where he's at. So I understand it might be difficult to record, set up the timing, but well, I'm sure we can make it happen. I want to get him on here. But at any rate, he did a whole video about activation systems. It was about 40 minutes long. And he talked a lot about Warhammer and why the big legacy games effectively lean more on you go, I go. Whereas if you look at their other games, like the offshoot games,
sure,
almost all of those use some varied activation system. Usually some kind of alternating activations, but not necessarily model to model. Like it varies, differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he talked about how they can be more experimental, more, they can make those changes with the other games, with the mainline games. They have a lot of like history and they have a lot of weight behind them, and people are reticent to make changes that are too big. And also at the same time, like I will say, he made a good point, and it's worth breaking down here, that your two sort of main things, as you said, that people always talk about is exactly what you set up. I go, you go, right?
Yeah.
So the traditional Warhammer style of like, or a lot of historical games are like this too. Not all, but a lot of classic historical games are somewhat like this, where it was like your side went and then their side goes, and then your side goes and then their side goes, right? And so on. Versus alternating activation, which is just what we all know as like, I move a unit, you move a unit. I do a thing. I activate a model or a unit or a something, and then you do that. And he pointed out that this was, I think, really succinct. Alternating activations increases the feel of tactical reactive play. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because
you are
I'm responding to what you did.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. But I go, you go increases the feeling of strategic army planning play. Okay. Like you're the general way above the scene that can like lay a trap, and then all of your units can like move into position at once and execute some big maneuver. Right. And this is true. Like I do this all the time in AOS, or when all the games I played, or going back to fantasy, where I would like spend a couple turns, you're setting up, you're moving here, you're moving here, you're doing this. And then all at once you like spring the trap, right? 2 units charge in, another unit charges over here. You do this thing, you unleash this big giant plan that you have. And so it gives you this broader strategic sort of grand feeling, right? Because you're not so zoomed in of like each move invites a counterplay, right? And so I do think that's an interesting way to look at it. But there are big downsides, obviously, to the you go, I go thing as well. Big downside.
I think it makes more sense, if I'm perfectly honest, because I really kind of don't like you go, I go. I'm not going to lie. That being said, it does make more sense in something like the Old World or Kings of War or Conquest, The Last Argument of Kings, which I don't even know if they do it in Conquest. I don't think they do, but
they don't. They don't.
Okay. But any kind of big rank and flank game, that makes a bit more sense to me. You know what I mean? Because you're right. You do have a general who is like yelling things, and there's guys with flags that are like sending out, orders to these people and those people and whatnot and all that kind of stuff. You can't see it, but Vince was just mimicking a flag guy. And
that was just a joke for Adam. I knew nobody can see it, but I did it for him.
That's fun though. Anyway, my point is that it makes more sense in that situation, whereas in a sci-fi game, it makes far less sense because all these people should be connected like in real time via, I don't know, radio, burst, micro, data, whatever.
They got little things in their helmets. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, sure, right. So in that situation, like, yeah, that's part of my issue. And the thing is that, and this is also a thing that I'm sure we'll hit on, but really the idea behind The reason that activation is very important is because it very, very much has to do with the story. And that's why I'm annoyed sometimes by 40K and the way that they do it. You know what I mean?
I do. I do. I mean, okay. I agree with your premise
Mhm.
that like a sci-fi game tends to lend itself better to that kind of thing, or like a close-up, even a close-up skirmish fantasy game, right?
I mean, it totally makes sense with skirmish. I don't know if I've ever even seen a skirmish game that's been You Go, I Go that I
They
can think
exist.
of.
They
Well, I'm
exist, but
sure they
you're
do.
right.
I just
They're
can't
much
think
more
of one off the
likely to
top of
do
my head.
alternating activation, which
Mhm.
is funny because okay, this is where it's important to have a little quick conversation about your number of game pieces.
Sure.
Okay. The average game, and I pointed this out in our SNARLcast chat because like I talked about this last episode or 2 episodes back
Mhm.
or something. I don't know. I made this point. The average game has between 5 and 12 game pieces,
Mhm.
right? Now, that might be, as you said, like 40 troops, but it breaks down to like, or 80 troops or 150 troops, like, I don't know,
Sure.
little models.
But each
But
each unit is a game piece.
correct. Like
In
as the
that
game sees it, it's a
right,
game
it may
piece.
have 12 models in it, but it's when you play an army game, you're moving these squads around like they're like a single thing.
Right. And like skirmish games, you tend to have 5 to 12 game pieces, and they
Sure.
tend to be just
It
individual people instead
right.
of a unit of 30 dudes. It's one
Mhm,
guy,
mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so it you're not doing the I go, you go different from skirmish to army because of the number of game pieces, right? Which I think is the perception somehow,
Sure.
but that's not correct,
Mhm.
right? It's the same number of game pieces, right? In fact, if you are playing like if you're playing Skaven in Warcry
Right.
or Goblins in Warcry,
Mhm.
it is very likely that you have more game pieces on the table than if you're like in Warcry than if you're playing Skaven in Age of Sigmar.
Now, again, not models, but
Not
like
models.
what
You
the
definitely have a
game
lot more
considers to
models.
be a unit.
Correct.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Because
Yeah.
I know like I ran up against you and you have like your 18 or 20 model.
No, no,
Uh,
that was the 13.
okay, sorry, you're
Yeah,
13.
the
I
plague.
apologize. There you
Yeah,
go. But you can
the
have like
original.
20 little Skaven in your thing total, right?
I couldn't figure out a way how to do it unless they were like, I don't know. I think maybe down the road when I first started playing Warcry, my
Mhm.
very first unit my very first warband that I built was plague monks, and I had exactly 13 plague monks, which was
Okay,
the
got it.
whole thing, and it was pretty cool. And it
Yeah,
came to
I don't
about
usually have
1,000 points.
13 units when I'm running my
Right?
Skaven
No,
army,
for
being the
sure.
point.
And in most games, you don't like maybe if you're playing 3,000 points of
Right.
um I don't know if you're playing like 3,000 points, maybe, or something like that of like 40K, you might. But in many situations, right, you're playing with far fewer units than that. But then, of
Right.
course, the units are also, again, I think it goes back to story a little bit
I
because,
agree.
you know what I mean? Like having like, yeah, maybe I've got 13 folks, 13 little people, 13 little, units running around of single models, but they're reacting differently. And that's why the alternating or whatever besides you go, I go, I think makes more sense in those types of games. But you're right. It has nothing to do with actual game unit pieces or whatever.
Right. But it feels like it does, right? I think that's where a lot of people's heads go. But I'm just pointing it out to say that's not what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you have so many models on the table. Absolutely.
Whereas I think you're exactly right. I think that the most important, okay, why do activation systems exist? Well, because we're playing a game together,
Right.
or even if we're co-oping against AI
Sure.
or something, right? You can't just be like, the game can't be just quick, move all your pieces, start rolling dice. You're all just doing
Right.
things. It's
Yeah.
chaos.
Yeah, like
Right.
time is linear, and so
Right.
if you
So we
went
have to
back
structure
into
this.
right, and if you went back through actual battles in the past, if you could break down everything, you could break them down into probably different turns and rules, even though that's not,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like if you were,
Yeah. Yeah.
we'd be talking about milliseconds in some situations, like, well, this guy activated and tried to chop this guy's head off, and this guy dodged, but he did it on his turn, which was a split second later or whatever. But you can't simulate that very easily on the tabletop. So on the tabletop, we can't seem to play the entire game all at once, and on top of
Right.
itself. So you have to sort of segment things and to break up time.
Exactly. So we know it's required. But the reality is that so like two things. One, I think the classic dichotomy of I go, you go versus alternating activation is on its face partially false. Because I think what most games end up doing is usually some kind of mixture of the two. I'll break that thought out a little more in a minute, right?
Hmm.
But the thing I want to get to tie back to what we were discussing is that I think activation systems, because they have to be there, they're such a critical part of how you experience the game. To me, they are like the number one thing that sort of sets the tone, the feel of the game, right? And I think they should, exactly what you said, they should be emergent from like either the story or the type of game you're telling or so on, right? The type of game you're meaning to portray. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think that like which is not to say that alternating activation is bad. Like there's been a few games we've used it in, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Sure. I mean,
Yeah.
so yes, but, and I want to,
Mhm.
we're going to break that down because I actually want to go through the history of our games and talk about each one
Sure.
and
Yeah, yeah.
why I framed it like I did.
Mhm.
But, and why we thought it was the right one, why I picked that particular mechanic. But before we like dive in there, you're right. Like just a simple like alternating activation of like I get to activate a piece, you get to activate a piece. There's nothing innately bad about that. We do know the problem. It was your Skaven thing, right? We
Right.
talked about the downside to the I go, you go is that
Mhm.
suddenly like I get to activate all of my forces. If I'm highly effective, I just can reduce your army to rubble
Right.
very quickly. And there's not much you can do because I got like to effectively activate all 5 to 12 of my game pieces at
Mhm.
once. And you had nothing to say about that, right?
Right.
In,
Maybe
in
some
a very
armor
traditional I go,
saves and
you go
stuff like
thing.
that. But yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Whereas with alternating activations, the problem is more of erosion over time, right? It's the water
Mhm.
chipping away the Colorado River, creating the Grand Canyon or whatever. Because like if you just simply have a lot more game pieces, you're Skaven with like 13 models. Versus when we played, I think I was like, I think, I played a game Warcry, and I think I was playing somebody that had like 5 models in the warband,
Something
right?
like that. Yeah, maybe 5 or
And
6.
so it's just like you had a crazy higher number of activations than me.
Sure. Mhm.
Right? So when there's like a distinct inequity in game pieces, which can happen either through list building or if you have forced equalization of game pieces, which can happen sometimes,
Mhm.
it'll happen over the course of the game. Because like as I lose things, then I have less activations, right? And
I've
so
been
effectively I
told
have less board control.
I've been told time after time after time again, as far as list building is concerned, in most situations, specifically if it is a campaign game, it is all about boys before toys. Whereas when you are building your list, if you get more models, that's better than having
Ah,
fewer models that have cool toys
I
because
get it now.
you get more activations, you get more bites at the apple. Yeah, that
Right.
boys before toys thing is like because you could be like, I got this awesome group of 6 guys and they got all the toys and all this stuff and everything's and then you play against someone who's got a pointed stick, but they have 14 guys with pointed sticks. And then all of a sudden you run into that problem. So
Yep.
yeah, it is definitely a thing that, I think that the nice thing about alternating is and I don't know if this is even necessarily the truth. I know I've played games before 40K where I'm like, I didn't get first turn and then half or even a third of my stuff is
Sure. You lose a
gone.
bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, that's okay. And now you're fighting a heck of an uphill battle, which is the whole reason why you put stuff in reserve and this and that and blah, 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 whatever. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not a style that I enjoy as much. Whereas the reactive thing going back and forth, I think is for me personally is a little bit more interesting. And again, alternating activation is not bad. One of my favorite games is alternating activation. Like Space Weirdos is basically because they're not trying to put they're in my mind they're not trying to put that like try to make they're trying to put the interest in other areas, kind of. You know what I mean? To some
Sure.
degree.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, alternating activations is chess, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yep.
just chess.
Mhm.
You don't like start by moving like white doesn't get to like move all of its pieces once.
Right.
It's not,
Exactly. You don't get to roll
obviously.
off, and yeah.
Yeah, sure.
But
Like,
yeah.
but like with that, we should say that like also there's a real factor of engagement here, right? When you're designing your activation system, again, whether it's like some kind of mix or an unusual thing, we'll talk about later. We're going to talk about lots of fun alternate systems as well. The reality is that if you have long periods of time where you're really not doing anything active,
Right.
okay. And by the way, like rolling saves or whatever, right? That's not an active thing. That's a
Not particularly.
reactive thing.
Yeah.
The upside, if you are successful and roll all your saves really well, what happens? The game state does not change,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
You maintain the current game state. So, like, when I say when you're making active choices, that means you influence the game state in your favor, not to hold the game state steady. This is an important distinction that I think often gets overlooked, right?
hmm
Okay. So, whereas on your turn, you are making choices, you are an active player. The things that you're doing are influencing the game. Like either the two choices are things get better for you or things stay static. If
Right.
you're the player who's not active, things stay static or they get worse for you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. For the most part.
Okay. And then, games will try to tackle this in different ways. Like Age of Sigmar obviously tried to tackle this with reactions.
hmm
That now I'll say, since the game began, like since AOS launched, they did have some version of alternating activations in there. It was just in the combat phase, right? And that's why I say almost no games are actually truly one or the other of these things. They all have some kind of mix to some degree.
hmm
But like in AOS, yes, it's my turn. And so like I move and I get to shoot and whatever, and you don't shoot off turn.
Right.
But when we get in a punch up, like when I charge in and fight, let's say I've got 3 of my units fighting 3 of your units.
hmm
Okay. Like I get to choose who fights first. So then,
Because it's
okay,
your
my
turn.
unit fights here. This is my turn. But then you get next choice. So like my second unit that charged in, they could end up dead before they ever get to swing. I've had that
Right.
happen where I charge a unit in and then they die. So
hmm
that then suddenly switches to alternating activations,
hmm But
right?
just in that particular
Phase.
phase. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Now, as AOS went on, what they started adding was more and more reactions, right? Where you can actually like, okay, you can move off turn by redeploying your troops. You can shoot off turn by using like Unleash Hell, and you can cast your spells off turn. Those
hmm
all cost some kind of resource, so you can't just
Sure.
do it all endlessly.
hmm
But now you are actually getting a bite at the apple of being engaged off turn to where you can influence the game positively. Right. So even though AOS is like ostensibly a you go, I go structure, even though I mean it could be potentially I go, or you go, because
right.
it
Yeah.
can has
Yeah.
the double turn as well.
Yep.
Those like abilities, those that let you sort of act off turn, are how they're incorporating alternating activation type play, where they're
Right.
keeping you engaged. That's why they're doing that, right? So you feel like you're actually engaged in something where you can push the game in your favor.
Right. Exactly. And then there's also, we were talking about kind of emergent story and things like that. And activation systems can definitely play a part in that.
100%.
The thing that I talk about all the time is I compare, and this can kind of head us into starting to talk about some of the activation systems we've done for our games. But I like to compare, let's say, bolt action
Yep.
to rain
This is
and
the
hell.
classic example.
Yeah, yeah. Well, amongst you and I, it's the classic example.
I
but
mean,
yes,
a lot of people reference bolt action because it has such a like its activation system is so iconic,
for
right?
sure, for sure. Yeah, but then just me comparing it, I've compared it multiple times to Rain and Hell, and I think there's a reason for that. But the idea behind in bolt action, if you haven't played it, is that you get a die. Let's say you've got 5 units left and your opponent has 6 units left. You put 5 of your dice into the bag. Your opponent puts 6 of their dice, 1 for each unit. And then you shake of the bag, and then someone reaches in and pulls out a die. And then if it's my die, I get to activate a unit. If it's one of your die, you get to activate a unit. We will get to activate our units, but we don't know which ones we're going to get to activate. And you don't have to pick a die and say, oh, this is this particular unit. You get to pick which one of your units you get to do. But it can, and there's like, if you go too many times in a row, the other ones are coming, but I think they have rules for like, oh, you can only do it like twice or 3 times in a row or whatever. But, the idea behind it is that war, specifically World War II, is a very fog of war place. It's very
there's explosions and dirt in the air and smoke everywhere and fires.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
You're losing contact. The radios are shoddy at best, right? That kind of thing.
So you don't know. You're constantly reacting to what's going to happen next. Whereas when you take something like Rain in Hell, at the beginning of each turn in Rain in Hell, again, you have dice for each of your demons, but you don't keep them in a bag. I have a 12-sider for each of my demons. You have a 12-sider for each of your demons. You throw your dice. I throw my dice. We put them on our like Cabal sheet and we stack them starting from the highest number up. And then let's say you've got a 12 die, then that means on the first phase you get to activate any one of your demons. But then we look at my sheet and I have 2 11s, which means I get to do 2 demons after I get done with yours. And we can see this. I can see yours. You can see mine. And
known information.
Exactly. It's known information because there's not explosions. There's not too much to conceal what's going on. It's a big scrum. It's a melee. And as the leader of each group, we can see which way the wind is blowing as far as how things are going and all that kind of stuff. And that's what those 2 activation systems are doing to fit with the story and to make things a little bit more interesting strategically as well. Not just doing it for funsies, but actually having a reason why it happens.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, I think if you go back to Warhammer Fantasy, okay, the idea behind that being the I go, you go, or whatever situation makes sense. These grand armies marching out on the field against each other, right? And the whole army executes some maneuver, it comes forward, some things redeploy, they move over here. And then the other general's okay. And then they call their troops to respond across the vast field of battle, right? As they send flag lines up and down and runners go up and down. And then those troops then act as they would for that army. And then so on and so forth, right? As the whole grand army reacts to what the other grand army is doing, right? Because the individual troops aren't making individual decisions. They're following the orders theoretically of a central commander, right? Whereas exactly like bolt action, that dice, that bag, the fact that it's blank to you, it's unknown information. You have no idea who's going to pull what thing, right? It's just a blank space. Somebody's going to activate. You don't know who it is, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Does really well, exactly like you said, simulate that fog of war, the unknown, the fact that you have to react quickly. But it's also, I want to point out something else really interesting about that. There's a mechanical work that's really interesting that's happening there at the same time. Okay. So let's say you're both dealing with 5 units. So we've each got 5 dice in the bag. So we're completely even on chance, right? That either of us gets pulled. Okay. We pull out a dice. It's my dice. I get to activate a unit, right?
Yep.
Great. Okay. On the next pull, it is now more likely that you activate.
Right. Because I have more dice in the bag.
Right. You've got 5 to my 4. Let's say we pull a dice out and it's another one of mine. So I get to activate a second time in a row, right? Oh, bad luck for you. But now it is even more likely that it's going to be your turn. And it becomes more likely that you get to do the same thing at some point later on, right?
Twice in a row or whatever.
That's right. Statistically, your chances of getting that same situation have also increased. So it's a fascinating, it's technically an RNG system, right? It's a random number generator. It's just happening without actually rolling the dice.
Yeah.
And it's also self-leveling in a really fascinating way, right? Where it allows for runs, but the run's naturally theoretically correct.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
With Rain in Hell, I want to point out something that when we did that activation system, exactly, it was the demon, it's very your leader demons are very much in control of their cabals. They are absolutely the big chiefs. And so we wanted to give that perception and that tactical planning where yes, it's a close-up, brutal melee game, right? And so they can see where the battle's going and they know and can sort of plan accordingly. And so we wanted to allow for that, both in the world, the demon sees what's happening, but out of the world, the player can see, okay, they're going to have 3 activations in a row. So I need to make sure I put this guy up there as bait to pull them out. And then boom, I can come in with my other dudes, right? So they can execute these little plans based on the runs of dice right? That are naturally occurring that I can see and know, okay, I'm going to have a 12, but then they'll have 11, 11, 10, but then I've got 9, 8, and then they don't, and then they have a 7, but then I've got 6, 5. So I'm technically going to be able to go run 4 to their 1, right? And you can start doing that kind of planning.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing to point out there with Rain in Hell is we also handled I really wanted to tackle a very classic problem that skirmish systems with those kinds of dice activations run into. The other thing with alternating activations. Okay, in a normal game of just straight alternating activation, you activate your guy, he walks forward, he shoots at me. He's like the closest, easiest target, right? Let's just say. Okay. I activate my guy. The person on your board I am least incentivized to kill is that guy.
Because he's already done his thing.
Right. Assuming the game has like a limitation of only one activation. There are a couple of games that don't, where you could, like Infinity, you can just like run, you can keep running one guy over and over again.
Yeah. Right? You get X amount of activations, but you can put them all in the same guy if you want to or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But if the game has most games tend to have a pretty standard, like one activation per game piece rule. And if that's the case, then killing that guy like buys me nothing in the round. I'm still going to get just as much. I have reduced my incoming pain 0%. Right? So then I'm encouraged to take the harder shot or to go kill somebody that hasn't activated and whatever. It creates these weird incentives. In Rain in Hell, the other thing we do is when you kill an enemy model, the opponent loses an activation. Like they lose a dice. All right. Now they've already spent a dice that round to activate that model, but they lose one off their play sheet.
Right.
Okay.
The lowest one, I believe, right?
Yeah, I mean, usually they can technically remove anyone they want.
Sure,
but yes,
but that
usually
the
smart
smart
one you remove.
Yeah.
Yes. And what that means is that you're going to have a demon that doesn't activate that round.
Because other demon got killed, even though it was one that activated already or whatever. Or whether
exactly.
It didn't. Yeah.
And I wanted to do that because I really wanted to turn that paradigm on its head, right? Like killing somebody who hasn't activated, that's good. They lose a die, but they stay even. But you've done what you've done that's good, right? You've stopped that model from activating and harming you. It has its own built-in benefit. But if you kill the person who's already activated, yes, they already got to do their thing. They might have already killed one of your dudes or hurt one of your people or whatever. But you've now potentially left one of their models hanging with their butt out in the wind, right? Because they got nothing to do. So, like, again, the activation system says a lot because you're disrupting their plans overall by hitting those models that are there, right? Regardless of which one it is. We wanted that to represent that activation system to represent the disruption of the lines from them losing models, right? Because each demon has like this careful plan they're trying to execute. And when their models die, their plans start to unravel.
Exactly.
Okay. Real quick, I want to run through our games. Sound good? And kind of talk about just some stuff with them? All right. So Space Station Zero, right?
Our second game.
That's right.
Yeah.
Our second game. In Space Station Zero, it's a roguelike, right? So it's tough. It's a hard game.
Sure.
Right? It's meant to be a survival challenge.
When you were playing solo or co-op, yeah, exactly. That's the idea. When you're playing versus, I mean, it's dependent on how hard of a player you're playing against. But when you're playing against the game, it is designed to be a more difficult game and a harder nut to crack.
Yeah, and you're like, I mean, you're running through these 24-ish scenarios, depending on how many you end up actually playing through. It's usually less than that, of course, but something like that. And the odds are already very stacked against you with like the number of enemies and stuff like that, right? And so the way we did the activation was just the players get to activate first, right? And they get to activate a couple of models, and then the enemies go and activate a couple of models, and then back and forth. Very alternating. It's pretty standard, but the players always get first move, right? Because they're the active party coming into the scenario, right? The way the game is structured, they're like coming into a new room and discovering what it's about in the space station. And so they technically make the first move. I like that because one, it's simple, and that actually suits the complicated nature of, because each room is its own puzzle you have to solve, right? Sometimes you got to kill stuff, you got to science stuff. You got to do
Mhm.
different things, right? So I wanted the activation system of the game to be relatively simple because it's 4 or 6 or 8 independent members of a team. Like they're all individual people, but they all have their own skill sets, being able to go off and do their own things as the turn evolves, right?
Mhm.
And the other way we balanced that one is this is another way where we very much took in mind the boys before toys
Sure.
concept, because you can run a 4-person crew, a 6-person crew, or an 8-person crew, right?
Plus commander.
And plus commander, yes.
Mhm.
And like all else being equal, the obvious choice would just be take the 9 people because you'd get a ton more activations, right? And so it'd be like, okay, well that gives me a way more chances to go do science or shoot at bad guys or whatever, right?
Right.
But the way that's balanced is that the stats on the 4 unit on the heavies, as it were, right,
Right.
are higher so that every one of their activations is worth about 2 of the 8-person's activations, the 8-person team activations,
Mhm.
right? In other words, because it's a dice pool to success game, like one of them will tend to do about one member of the 4-person crew will tend to do about twice as much damage or get twice as many successes on a challenge, all else being equal, that an 8-person crew will get. Right.
Mhm.
So we balanced it on the other side, which I thought was fun. Right.
And it wasn't like a list building type game. It was very, yeah,
Correct.
it depended on like what kind of play you like to play. Do you want to have, 4 elites or 6 middle of the roads or, 8? And the thing is as well is that then, if you're playing it in a campaign setting, of course, when you have 8 guys who start to kind of ramp up, that can be sometimes better, but you also might get to a point where when you finally start to get ramp up, you don't have 8 guys anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because
Because
they
they're
start to,
dying.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So,
Yeah. So then came Majestic 13. And Majestic 13 is like an ogre style game, right? So you've got one big bad, usually, hopefully. I hope
mhm.
you don't get the nightmare scenario of 2 or 3 aliens. That can happen, and boy, is it scary.
Yeah,
Um, but you have the one big bad against your 5 people, right? So like right away, the action economy, the activation economy, you would think would be very in favor of the PCs who have 5 game pieces to the enemy's 1.
mhm.
So here what we tackled is that the monsters, number 1, almost always activate first.
Yeah, because they're
Because
very fast and speedy and just yeah.
yes, it's a traditional stat allocation or stat system, like initiative system, effectively.
Mhm.
Right? Like there is a stat, it's called acuity. And the higher that number, you activate on that number. And then we just count down, right?
Mhm.
And that's it. And the aliens just tend to have a way freaking higher acuity than any human is because they're all bigger, stronger, faster, tougher than the humans are. That's the whole point of the thing, right?
Right.
So having them almost always go first communicates a lot about the story of the game. They are faster than you, stronger than you, scarier than you, right? Like and so hence you're on the back foot from the jump,
Mhm.
right? From the second you hot drop into that scenario from your like helicopter or whatever, the odds are against you, right? This thing is stronger than you, better than you. At the same time, the alien also activates multiple times, right? So if it's like acuity is 27, it activates like multiple times throughout the round. So most of them will activate like 3 times.
So it's not just going first, it's doing multiple activations during the round where each of your models, which you always have 5 models, until they start to croak, but you'll get them back in the next mission, but you can't lose them during the game. But nonetheless, you get 5 activations and not the first one generally ever, and your opponent, the big monster, gets the first one and multiple others.
That's right. And I like how that feels because the thing it gets to be scary and always go first, but also be reactive to what they do through its later activations, right?
Mhm.
And it just shows how dangerous the single foe is. Okay, Death Wizards. The advantage here, it uses an alternating activation system, but one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to have a game where you could have like a bunch of skeletons, or you could have like one big flesh column,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because to me, a necromancer could have both. And the problem there is that the skeleton guy is boys before toys is almost always going to be the better choice.
Right.
Right. So we broke up the activation by, and this is a thing like, I think it's called Legion Adeptus Titanicus, Tiny Peopleus. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah.
they activate regiments, groups of things. Like each regiment activates at once. So it alternates between the regiments. Like this is a battle group. So it gets to activate and so on and so forth.
But it's
Death
also
Wizard.
it's
Oh,
different
good.
because it's not I remember when they first launched that game, I was kind of interested because it wasn't the normal GW you go, I go.
Yeah, sure.
It was like, okay, it's the movement phase. And now I'm going to move a thing, and then you're going to move a thing, and I'm going to move a thing, and you're going to move a thing. And you go back and forth. So it's not like
Right.
activation where you do all the things that this unit could do. They've got it like, and then we get to the combat phase, and then I do some shooting, and then you do some
Right.
shooting. And so it's an even different kind of system, that one, which I thought was
Yes.
interesting for a while.
It is pretty neat. And the reason though that but I want to draw your attention to is that they draw a circle around a group of units and say this is effectively one thing for activating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is what we did in Death Wizards as well. You get to activate 4 rating worth of stuff and your Necromancer, right? So here, your Necromancer, being the most powerful model on the board, activates every time their minions activate. So again, the multiple activation to show power.
Mm-hmm.
And now the Flesh Golem, it's 1 activation. And the skeletons, who are 4, because it's a rating 4 monster.
Right.
And then each skeleton that's rating 1, that's 4 rating worth of undead, right? And so that's how it stays balanced of going alternating back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
The players, again, always get first activation because they're the attackers. They're the marauders, right? They're the ones coming in
into the village to mess up the villagers and the paladins and the rangers and the etc.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then with Rain and Iron, we effectively just went on, like Rain and Hell's activation system just stayed. Same reasons. So
yeah,
that's fine. No, like that one just yep. It was good before. It's good again. It's a continuation of the same world and basic premise. So there you go.
I mean, it's a standalone sequel. It's just the difference in that game, besides activation, the activation's not really any different, but the difference is that you've got demons fighting robots, and the robots have range attacks, and the demons only have don't.
Right.
And so you've got that kind of balance, which we've talked about a little bit before. But
yeah, the things we did to actually trick that balance out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which brings me to, I want to discuss some weird ones with you, Adam, here in our
mm-hmm.
like in our last, as we're bringing this down, and then I want to talk a little Chrome Rangers to close us out.
Yep.
I also like interesting, unique takes. We already mentioned one of them, which is just like an initiative system, right?
Yep.
Like counting down from a number. Old Warhammer used to do that. If you remember back in the day, right? Like your troops would fight in combat per their initiative. I don't know if you remember that or not. Like unless you had a 2-handed weapon, in which case it made you like initiative 1 when you were slow, right?
Because you're slow, yeah.
I always like that. That's a very role-playing game feel.
It's the same way they did it with Star Wars X-Wing. It was your pilot skill. The more skilled pilots got to shoot before the less skilled pilots, but the less skilled pilots had to move before the more skilled pilots. I think something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because the more skilled pilots were able to react to the movement of the less skilled pilots and got to shoot before the less skilled pilots. I think that's right.
Well, they didn't get to react because you were picking you had the dials where you had to pick your movements, but it was still advantageous sometimes to have the other guy go first so that you would hopefully, you knew you would be more likely to move in behind them because you knew they were pilot skill 2 and you were pilot skill 5. So you could try to plan that way.
Yep. Got to turn off that targeting computer, Luke.
Yeah.
Okay, so I like that one. I like, you can also go like fully random. Fully random is also interesting. Like fully random means it's not alternating at all. Like it alternates, but on a completely random basis. Like imagine you just roll off every time to see who activates next, right? That's fully random.
Mm-hmm.
There's in other words, the last roll does not influence the future roll in any way. Like the fact that I got to activate a unit means nothing. We're both just doing a high roll every time, right?
Yep.
There's random with a reinforcement loop. That's bolt action.
Right.
Where by you going first, last, or you getting to activate, it decreases your chances of activating again next time to some degree. By
like
some
honestly,
percentage.
if you wanted to do the fully random, you could just flip a die or flip a coin. You just flip a coin every turn, and then heads it's this and tails it's that. I mean, yeah,
that's right. and you get into the old like Guildenstern and Rosencrantz are dead, where you get like heads like 50 times in a row or whatever.
Sure,
That kind of thing. Bidding is another interesting one that I think not enough games use. Again, all of these are going to feel right in different kinds of games, right? Like if I was doing a really chaotic game, okay, like one that was meant to be like truly just like chaos forces fighting each other, just madness incarnate, I would use the fully random activation.
Sure.
Right?
Makes sense.
We already talked about how the random with reinforcement works really well for something like Fog of War. I think stat-based works really well for like a role-playing game feel, right? Where you're trying to bring that kind of element in. I think bidding works well if you're trying to simulate a very specific kind of play. Like let's say you were doing like an Old West game, right? Okay. Something like a bidding mechanic where you would represent it with maybe like a deck of cards or something would be an awesome way to do your initiative.
Right? I mean, that's basically Malifaux.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know about the newest version of Star Wars Legion because I have not yet read the rules, but the previous version of Star Wars Legion kind of had that. It was bidding but it was bidding for like, if I remember correctly, you'd have a card that would have a certain symbol on it, and certain armies in your certain forces in your army would have the same symbol. So if you decided I'm going to do this, then you would get to go first, but that means that in your first activation, you had to activate the armies that had the same symbol as this. And so sometimes, and it had something to do with like, because I know sometimes you could have heroes like Luke Skywalker and crap like that or whatever. And again, it's been a really, really long time since I played that, and I have not read the new one, so I don't know what the new second edition.
Tell us below.
Comments
if you watch this. Tell us about the new Star Wars system.
But I thought it was an interesting system because of the bidding. You got a little bit more choice to it in that situation, and it also came back to, that would come back to roost as well sometimes, where you'd be like, oh, because I did that, this happened.
Yeah, bidding is like the one subsystem that I've wanted to put in a game for a long time. Like I've got an itch to do a bidding activation system, but we just haven't had the right game where the story aligns that's the correct choice to make. And I'm never going to never try to force a mechanic. One of the big differences between a neophyte game designer and experienced game designer is a neophyte game designer will just force a mechanic they think is cool into a game, even when it doesn't align with the guiding principles, right? Never force a mechanic. It has to feel emergent of the story. And this brings me, if I can, I wanted to for those who've stuck with us here, I just want to close us out or bring down to the end here, talking about activation system in Chrome Rangers, in the upcoming Snarl game. In Chrome Rangers, one of the things I did when I tried to design the rules was, and I've told Adam this, but I went and watched like a bunch of mech anime fights, okay, like compilations on YouTube, and watched how they fought. And I realized that the way they fought felt a lot like fencing and Ijutsu dueling and stuff like that, which I have done and myself as well a bunch when I was younger. And it felt very like I recognized immediately what was going on there. And it's like a lot of move, counter move, but not in the traditional alternating activation sense, right? What I mean is, what I noticed is it wasn't like I attack you and then you attack me and then I attack you and then you attack me, which is how a traditional alternating activation system will work, right? Instead, it would be like I attack and then the other mech would do some defensive thing. Like I shoot missiles at you, the defensive mech throws up flares. And then I come forward and shoot a gun at you and you dodge to the side. And then I close the rest of the way and I try to swing my sword at you and you block. Right? And sometimes you parry so well and you'll see them then like turn it around and they like parry with their one giant mech sword and then they punch at the mech with the other one or shoot the mech with the other one, right? And now the person who was on the offense is suddenly on the defense. Right? And so that's what we were seeking to capture in the activation system for Chrome Rangers. Basically, there's an active player who's sort of making these offensive moves, and the defensive player is actively choosing different defensive measures to hedge it off. And if they do it really well, they can actually flip the script, turn it around, and then they suddenly can make an attack. And once an attack hits, like once there's a resolved attack, the fighters like break apart. Think like two fencers where it's like, generally like a fencer, you'll have one fencer on the attack and the other one sort of moving backwards in a defensive posture until they'll try to riposte. And if that riposte is successful, or if the attack is successful, the two of them split apart. You don't just like sit there as a fencer and be like whack, 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 and just keep
Sure,
hitting
yeah,
them.
yeah.
Right? You both back up and then start again. Right?
Mhm.
And so that's basically the feeling. It'll have this very like fencing, dueling feel where one person is pushing the advantage until they either succeed or push too far, and then the other person's able to flip and take advantage of that.
Right, yeah. I like the overall concept of that. That was another thing that I used to like in not exactly the same, but in Song of Blades and Heroes, when it got to the point
Yes.
where you now have to you've decided to do hand-to-hand combat. It's your turn. You can totally get killed or lose hand to hand. You know what I mean? When
Yep.
when the two of us come together to hit each other, even though it's my turn, you might just hit me way harder. And so that's one of those situations where you're basically kind of starting a fire and we'll see where it goes every time that you get into hand-to-hand combat, which makes sense. When you're shooting somebody with a bow or an arrow or whatever in that game, they can't grab the arrow and throw it back at you. You know what I mean? It's a very more
Sure.
one-sided thing, which is one of the benefits of range. But in this situation,
Unless you're in like a wuxia martial arts movie, in which case, if you throw a ranged weapon or shoot a bow at
you're
somebody,
screwed. Yeah, no, you don't
that
wanna do that.
obviously like
Yeah,
Limu
yeah.
Bai is just going to catch that and just throw that right back at you. Don't
Right.
move.
But in general, yeah, that's not a situation. And so the thing that I like about this system for Chrome Rangers is the a little bit of an uncertainty. You're starting to go and you're kind of pressing the initial attack, but it could go a little bit the other way depending on
That's right.
things. We don't want to put too much out
Yeah,
there
you'll
yet,
see. You'll
but
see how it works
yeah,
depending on things, depending on choices that are made. Yes.
exactly.
And it's a bit of, it's not fully leaned into this, but the other sort of activation mechanic, and you just referenced at it, there's a bit of like an homage to this. It's not exactly this. We're sort of weakly using this, is a push mechanic.
Mhm.
Right? So like there's a couple of games that use this as well, where you can activate and then you can choose to push and push and push. And the more you risk, right, pushing, you're eventually going to run out of steam, or the dice are going to turn against you or something, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And then it's going to flip over to the other person,
Right.
right? And usually at some cost, depending on how far you pushed it. So I like push risk reward is
Yeah.
effectively like push risk reward activation systems. I think those are interesting too. And again, that to me would suit a game where like your heroes are desperately struggling against like long odds.
Mhm.
So like if that's the general story and the vibe that you've got going on, something like a push mechanic where the heroes are always up against it, trying so hard to just like cling to the cliff by their fingernails, right?
Right,
That's
right.
the appropriate activation system for that one. I'm always fascinated by how much story you can tell through mechanics. I think activation systems is one of the chief places you can do that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like attacking and shooting and these things. Very frequently, you're basically trying to come up with some numbers and then roll, and it's either an opposed roll or it's a target roll, or like there's different. There are definitely other mechanics out there under the sun, but in general, I think where the more interest, at least for me, comes is in activation very frequently. And it is interesting to see specifically how some of the biggest games out there are kind of just using like I don't want to say the bare minimum activation, but they're using the less interesting, in my mind,
Yeah,
activation.
kind of the most rote application of the thing, right?
Exactly, yeah. And they're, I think, trying to put more of the heavy lifting of game design maybe into, I don't know, multiple roles for any given thing that you need
Sure.
to do, or tactics and, special stratagems and all that kind of stuff. Like that is I'll be honest with you, tactics and stratagems, I do not miss them moving into Trench Crusade, one page rules, like all that special gotcha, this thing. Oh, here's a card that says I get to do, like, I don't miss
Sure.
that at all. Cause anyway. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
So
my closing thing is I'll just
yeah.
say I would highly encourage indie game designers to think deeply about what's the story you're telling, and of
Mhm.
all the activation systems we talked about, initiative, bidding, random reinforcement, alternating mixes of alternating and I go, you go, and all this kind of thing, right? Push risk reward mechanics. What best suits your game? What's going to tell your story the best? Experiment around, try some different systems in your game to see what you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is a big portion of what makes your game interesting, rules wise, at least, to potential players. And more often than not, you end up having to show them this in some sort of like a battle report. It's hard to explain, like in the blurb and your, and your listing on Wargame Vault, the activation scheme. That's a thing that will definitely turn off initial buyers sometimes. But if you can have a video that explains it and shows the interesting kind of thing, even if it's a little short video or something like that, it really does, I think, help. Thank you for checking out this episode of the SNARLcast. We hope we were able to teach you something. If you've got suggestions for future topics, hit us up in the comments on YouTube or send us an email or anything like that. You could check our website at www.snarlingbadger.com/snarlcast for more information and for more episodes. And that's also where you'll find our email address on the actual contact page, I think, on Snarling Badger. But nonetheless, follow us on your podcast software of choice. I think we're on most of them. Leave a review if you get the chance. We appreciate that. And we appreciate your time.